knife and...
Time to testify. Into the shadows. Ready.
Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to my complete and detailed Clorinde guide. Clorinde is an all-new 5-star Electro DPS who has a one-of-a-kind playstyle and who I will help you guys build in today's video. We're gonna cover everything you need to know about Clorinde, her best builds, weapons, teams, artifacts, constellations, playstyles, combos, and much more. Before we begin, I want you guys to know that I do stream both sites on Twitch, link in the description if you're interested. And with that being said, let's talk about Clorinde. Alright, so starting things off, what does Clorinde actually do? Well, she honestly is a character with a very unique kit and playstyle that, in my opinion, makes her a very fun character. First of all, her elemental skill is an absolute wall of text, but really isn't that complicated. What you need to know about this ability is a few things. First of all, when you press your skill, your normal attacks will get converted to a pistol that you can fire, shooting her gun and dealing electro damage. As you do this, you will also gain Bond of Life 35% per shot, capping out at 100% of her max HP. The shots she fires can pierce opponents, increasing damage to opponents in their path, just meaning that they can have pretty good AoE and actually deal damage to enemies in a line or next to each other. Now, outside of just her pistolet shots, she can also press her skill again at any point to lunge forward and deal an attack with her sword. This one will deal quite a bit more damage, scaling on how much Bond of Life you have and actually consuming it to deal more damage. It will clear your Bond of Life value and deal more damage and also heal you based on how much Bond of Life you have, with the max multiplier being at 100% Bond of Life. Additionally, pressing your skill again has no cooldown. You can use it multiple times or whenever, and because it's such a strong hit compared to her other hits, as you can see, the scaling is quite a bit higher. It hits multiple times. Using this sword attack is essential to maximizing your damage. Because of this, Clorinde will typically be able to fire pistol shots to stack up her Bond of Life, 3 to max it out, and then use the Bond of Life that you gained to do a sword hit by pressing your skill, consuming the Bond of Life, dealing good damage, and then you will just repeat the process by then firing your pistol, by normal attacking, and then using your skill again until your skill expires. Once you use your skill, you will be in this buffed state called Night Vigil for 7.5 seconds, where you can do all of your fun combos. The cooldown of this ability is 16 seconds, meaning that you do have 8.5 seconds of downtime, and we'll talk about how to get around that later in the video. For now, what you need to know though is that most of your kit, most of your damage, most of what makes Clorinde is her elemental skill. Now, if that wasn't enough, something you might have noticed that is very essential and unique to her is that as you're using your skill, Clorinde will actually heal herself. In fact, every time you use your sword attack called Impale the Knight, not only will you deal more damage based on your Bond of Life, but you will also heal based on this Bond of Life. Again, it caps out at 100% since you passively gain Bond of Life as you attack without losing any HP, and then heal yourself back up as you use your sword hit in your skill, and typically you do this a lot. This makes Clorinde a self-sufficient character that usually doesn't even need a healer. You constantly will be dealing damage and then just healing up passively, which makes her a very comfy character, gives her some defensive utility in her kit, and allows you to deal a lot more team damage by being able to skip out on a defensive healer option and go for a more offensive support, although healers can still be viable. This means that she's a character who uses Bond of Life and heals herself without really being vulnerable, as she has a lot of free healing etched into her kit. Additionally, worth noting that any extra healing you get inside of your skill won't heal you and will just be converted to Bond of Life, and also worth noting that her swift shots do have a hit of Usia damage, which can help in certain content. It is also worth noting that inside of your skill, all of your pistol shots and also sword hits are considered normal attack damage, and so they scale with normal attack buffs and not skill buffs. With that in mind, their scalings increase with your skill level, so don't go leveling your normal attacks, but understand that your damage inside of your skill is considered normal attack damage. For Clorinde's elemental burst, it is relatively straightforward. First of all, you have a really sick animation where you will do a pretty solid amount of AoE electro damage. It's 5 hits, it hits everything around you, and it will also give you a pretty big Bond of Life, scaling with your talent level. Because you will gain upwards of 100% Bond of Life, this effectively will allow you to use your burst at the start of your rotation and then immediately use your skill and do a sword hit to start off your rotation, because you just get free Bond of Life on top of some nice electro damage. This ability has a 15-second cooldown and a 60 energy cost, and while it's not the main source of your damage, it is a nice chunk. It applies a decent amount of electro and gives you Bond of Life, which makes it a good ability. Moving on for your passives, first of all, I want to say that the scalings you're seeing are actually not entirely accurate because of your first passive that will buff you whenever you trigger an electro related reaction on any party member. When this is done, you will gain a stack increasing your electro damage dealt by your normal attacks and your burst, so effectively all of your damage, by 20% of Clorinde's attack for 15 seconds, stacking 3 times. This means that you effectively get 60% attack scaling for free on all of your abilities, as triggering an electro reaction is very easy and every single team that Clorinde's playing will be doing this. The only exception is if for some reason you have like 4 electro characters in your team, but please don't do this. Also, each of these stacks you can get from the same reaction. You don't actually need 3 different reactions, contrarily to other characters' passives like Neuvillette. You just need to proc any electro reactions 3 times, making this very easy. The max damage increase you can get from this is 1800, but generally just view this as a nice passive increase to your scalings without any effort. For a second ascension passive, this one will give you free crit rate. In fact, when Clorinde has 100% or more bond of life, she will gain 10% crit rate for 15 seconds whenever her bond of life value increases or decreases, stacking up to 2 times. This means that as you are just playing her, getting 100 bond of life and then using your sword hit, you can stack this twice, gain 20% crit rate, and then that's a free 20% crit rate that you can factor in when building this character. Keep in mind that she also has a crit rate ascension stat, so you start off with a lot of crit rate, around 44.2%, so keep that in mind when you're building her, but more on that in the artifact section coming up. Lastly, this passive also gives you a better conversion of healing to bond of life, which is a bonus. Before moving on, I want to say that your talent priority is leveling your skill and then your burst and ignoring your normal attacks. While your attacks inside of your skill are considered normal attack damage, as you can see here, their scaling does scale with your skill's talent level, so this is what you want to be leveling on top of your burst, and leveling your normal attacks is useless for the most part. Now, regarding Clorinde's playstyle, there's a lot of important things I want to say. While I will include a dedicated combo section a bit later in the video for exact rotations, for now what you need to know is that Clorinde has a very unique playstyle. She has an AoE burst that will give you some bond of life, a skill where you can fire off a pistol, shooting enemies, and then also using a sword in between your pistol hits as well. Once you have enough bond of life, doing a lot of damage. She also will have self-healing, which makes her a pretty comfy character and allows her to run teams without a healer, which can obviously increase her team's DPS by quite a bit. Additionally, she synergizes very well with Dendro, and while she does have some team flexibility, I will say that she's pretty restricted in terms of at least achieving like optimal Clorinde damage. Really making her feel like a strong carry is usually reserved to pairing her with a Dendro support and either running an aggravate team comp or a quick bloom, which is a mixture of quicken or aggravate and hyper bloom, to really maximize her damage. Without these amplifying reactions, she obviously won't feel as strong, although that is the case for quite a lot of electro units. Inside of these teams, notably aggravate teams, is where she shines. However, something you may have noticed is regarding her elemental skill and its uptime. You may notice that her skill has a duration of 7.5 seconds with a cooldown of 16 seconds. Because of this, it may not look like you have the best uptime on Clorinde, and to a certain extent that is true. 7.5 second duration, 16 second cooldown, that's roughly 7.5 seconds of downtime, which seems like a lot. But in practice, there are very easy ways to go about this. First of all is you can plan your rotation accordingly. Do a shorter 16 or so second rotation paired with characters that have lower cooldowns, as we'll see in the next few sections, covering her combos and teams in more detail. And after you're done using her skill, you can swap through your other characters, use their skills and bursts, and then when you swap back into your Clorinde, because her burst has a really long animation of around 2.5 seconds, this will help you stall even longer until your skill cooldown comes back up. And in practice, she really doesn't feel like she has too much of an issue with regards to uptime. Now, with that in mind, against multi-wave content like some Abyss floors, there can be more of a struggle here if you have to end your rotation early, swap out, maybe remark enemies when they heat up, cut your rotation short, or even just sometimes want more flexible rotations. Well, that's when the Thundering Fury set, which we'll talk about in the next section, can come in and help alleviate any uptime issues you may have. This set is solid and a contender for your best in slot depending on the situation, and it will greatly reduce your skills cooldown while you are using it. Even if it doesn't appear to be on cooldown, it counts towards it in her teams where she's spamming reactions as a way to do a longer rotation, which we'll cover later in the video, giving you more room for flexibility, comfort, and also helping you swap in and out of Clorinde without your skill having a huge cooldown, helping especially in multi-wave content. Overall though, I do think her quote-unquote uptime issues are overblown and in practice not the biggest deal, provided you know how to play around them and or build around them. With that said, after having played Clorinde for a long time, I think she's a very fun and solid DPS. Her playstyle is unique, unlike anything else we've ever seen. She has self-healing, which is cool. You might still want to run a shield though in certain content like the triple Kenkis, but her damage is solid. She's not game breaking. You don't need her. I view her as an aggravate carry upgrade, viable in other teams, but solid in Dendro teams, somewhat restricted, but a strong DPS overall with a fun and unique playstyle, although not game breaking and not someone that you need to pull, just a solid DPS if you want her. All right, so with that out of the way, let's talk about how to actually build your Clorinde. Well, first of all, for the artifact sets, it's It's pretty straightforward, although you do have a few different options. First of all, there are two sets that are the best and are somewhat interchangeable. The first one is the Fragment of Harmonic Whimsy set, your general option that gives you 18% attack on the 2-piece and then up to 54% damage bonus on the 4-piece as you are increasing or decreasing your Bond of Life. This will therefore happen naturally as you are playing Clorinde, increasing the damage of all of your kit significantly on top of giving you attack. 54% damage bonus and 18% attack is a lot of stats, making it a solid go-to option overall and typically the best in slot for your Clorinde's personal damage. With that in mind, another set that can sometimes be better, typically just another option that you can choose based on your stats, is actually the Thundering Fury set. The reason why this set can be so good is because the set does a lot of things. It gives you 15% electro damage bonus and then will also increase your reaction damage, notably Hyper Bloom and Aggravate by 40 and 20% respectively, but also and especially it will reduce the cooldown of your skill by 1 second up to once every 0.8 seconds as you trigger electro related reactions. This is something that you're always going to be doing, at least in her best teams, especially in something like an Aggravate or Quick Bloom team, and this will allow you to play in a completely different rotation. Now, I'm gonna keep it brief here and we'll talk about rotations later in the video, so stay tuned for that. Typically, because Clorinde's skill has a 16-second cooldown, this causes for a decent amount of downtime where you're swapping through your characters and doing a 16-second rotation with one skill cast. With that in mind, if you are running the Thundering Fury set, you can do a longer rotation where you're using your skill twice, using it once, then swapping back to your supports, refreshing their abilities, going back to your Clorinde with your reduced skill cooldown, being able to use it twice in a rotation and get a ton of value that way. Because of this, Thundering Fury is a potential best in slot option in her best teams, given how the rotation works, and also because it's nice for your team's overall damage, giving you better uptime on your supports, even though your personal damage may not be quite as high as a set that just gives you stats like the Phlegmonic Whimsy set. Overall though, both Whimsy and Thundering Fury are great options, so you can choose whichever one you have better stats on. Thundering Fury is for longer rotations, maybe a bit harder to pilot, but a solid option overall if you are triggering a lot of reactions. And then Whimsy is a standard go-to set that gives you a lot of stats for a Bond of Life carry like Clorinde, so a great choice overall. The Whimsy set is new though, and you will have to farm a domain, whereas Thundering Fury is available in the Strongbox if that's something that makes life easier for you. Outside of these two great sets though, there are other alternatives. First of all, 4-piece Gladiator is a great choice that you may already have and that gives you damage bonus. The Glad set is also surprisingly close to Whimsy, so if you don't want to farm a brand new set and don't want to use Thundering Fury, Gladiator is a solid general choice. Regarding Maréchaussée Hunter, this set gives you a ton of crit rate as well as some normal attack damage, which makes it good, but there are some problems, like notably you may overcap on crit rate because you have so many in your base kit, and also while Clorinde does manipulate her HP by self-healing, it may not be the most consistent thing in terms of getting 3 stacks, especially if you're already full HP and aren't getting hit, and so for better uptime, this set would be more recommended if you are running Farida, although even then you may overcap on crit rate, so keep that in mind as your mileage may vary. Outside of that, normal attack buffing sets are really good, such as Echoes, especially on low ping, Desert Pavilion if you weave in a charge attack at the start of your rotation, Shimanawas if you don't care about bursting as much, or Gilded Dreams for a ton of EM in an Aggravate or Hyper Bloom team. As you can see, there are a lot of options, so everyone should have a decent set for Clorinde, provided you farmed enough, but for the most part, the two best sets are either Whimsy or Thundering Fury, both being potential best in slots. Moving on, for the stats you want on Clorinde, this is very straightforward. Going for offensive stats like crit rate, crit damage, and attack percent will be the best to increase your damage. Elemental Mastery is also a good stat, notably in Hyper Bloom or Quick Bloom teams, and to a lesser extent in Aggravate. With that in mind, crit is still your priority to maximize your damage. And regarding energy recharge, in a lot of Clorinde's optimal teams, you really do not need much at all. In fact, because oftentimes you're running her, as we'll see in the team comp section, with another Electro support and Electro battery, notably someone like Fischl, who generates a ton of Electro particles from off-field that are being funneled into your Clorinde, you oftentimes won't need virtually any energy recharge at all. A lot of our optimal teams either don't need ER or need just very little, so it typically won't be a priority, generally speaking. With that in mind, there are some teams that might have a worse Electro battery, someone other than Fischl, or you may choose to run her as a solo Electro. Now, while this isn't generally recommended, at least meta-wise, if you do this, you then either have to build a lot more energy recharge or be okay with using your burst less often. Because her burst is pretty strong though, you typically do want to use it, although it isn't the majority of your damage. Generally speaking, you do not need energy recharge when paired with Fischl or just a team that generates a lot of energy, but if you have a worse Electro battery, are generating less energy, or are doing a weirder rotation, you might need a bit of energy recharge, and if you're a solo Electro and you want to use your burst, you will need more. There are some energy recharge numbers up on screen to help give you guys an idea, but as I said, a lot of the times, you really don't need that much ER when played efficiently. respectively. For your main stats, what you're looking for is generally attack percent on the sands, electro damage bonus on the goblet, and crit damage or crit rate on the circlet. With that in mind, for your sands, while attack percent is the general best option, elemental mastery is viable and can potentially be better in hyper bloom teams or quick bloom teams where you're triggering quicken and hyper bloom. Elemental mastery gains value and can be slightly better than attack, allowing you to choose either attack or EM based on your substats. Generally though, attack percent sands is her best and what I typically recommend. And regarding your circlet choice, both crit rate and crit damage are fine depending on what you need more of. Just be mindful that Clorinde does get a lot of crit rate, notably from her ascension stat and also 20% from her passive, so a lot of the times you may be more inclined to choose crit damage, but just try to keep your crit rate to crit damage ratio balanced. Moving on, for Clorinde's best weapons, you really have a lot of options, including one really good free-to-play one. Before we get there though, let's talk about her best in slot options, which are the 5-star swords, and honestly, most 5-star swords work because of how many good 5-star stat sticks the sword characters in Genshin have. With that in mind, her signature weapon, Absolution, is her best in slot option overall. This weapon gives you a very high base attack of 674, on top of giving you 64 crit damage through its stat and effect. Additionally, as your bond of life increases, you gain damage bonus for a total of 48%, which makes it a really good stat stick for Clorinde and her best overall. With that in mind, because there are so many good 5-star options, there are others that you may already have that can perform similarly, meaning you definitely don't need to pull for her new weapon. Notably, Haran Gapaku is a solid stat stick, giving you 33% crit rate, elemental damage bonus, and then a lot of normal attack damage bonus on its effect, which is very relevant for Clorinde because of the fact that her damage in her skill is considered normal attack damage. Similarly, Mist Splitter gives you a ton of stats, damage bonus, crit damage, and a high base attack. With this weapon, you do obviously want to use your burst to make sure you are stacking the passive efficiently. Light of Foliar Incision, especially if you are running a team that is triggering reactions and can make use of EM, potentially running an EM Sands in something like a Hyper Bloom or Quick Bloom team. Lo-Fi is a great stat stick. Jade Cutter as well is always good, although keep in mind that Clorinde gains a ton of crit rate, like through her passive and Ascension Trace, she starts at around 44%, meaning that with Jade Cutter, you start at almost 90 crit rate, so you might overcap on crit rate, making this weapon a bit worse, but if you can balance your ratio, then it is a solid stat stick. Freedom Sworn is good if you can make use of the EM in the teams I mentioned earlier, being decent for Clorinde and also increasing your team's damage. And Uraku Misugiri is a fine stat stick as well. With that in mind, Clorinde has a ton of good 4-star options, and one of her best overall is actually the Finale of the Deep, a craftable weapon that you can get from the Fontenian Blacksmith. This weapon is free to play, accessible, you can refine it to R5, provided you have the billets for it, which can be annoying, but you'll get it eventually, as this weapon gives you a ton of attack. It has a high base attack on top of having an effect that gives you more attack and additional bond of life, and then will also give you up to 300 attack at R5 based on how much bond of life you're clearing. This will therefore have very high synergy with Clorinde being a bond of life character, giving you a huge amount of stats because of how much attack this sword provides you with based on your bond of life, which you already have in your kit. This weapon is honestly pretty insane and has really good synergy for Clorinde, being potentially your best 4-star option overall. With that in mind, there are other 4-star options that are similar in strength, sometimes a bit better, like notably a high refined black sword that increases your normal attack damage, gives you crit rate, a little bit of healing, and is just a solid choice overall. With that in mind, the black sword is a battle pass option, and at R1, while it's still good, it's not even recommended over your free-to-play choice, kind of showing how good it is. Also, regarding Wolf's Fang, I don't recommend it because Clorinde's damage inside of her skill is considered normal attack damage and not skill damage, so you're not getting nearly as much value as you do with the black sword. On a similar note, a Lion's Roar with refinements at R5, provided you have good uptime on its effect, is also similar in strength and a solid choice. With that in mind, EM swords such as Iron Sting or Tukabu in teams where you are triggering reactions are viable choices as well, although not as recommended. With that in mind, to show you guys how good her different weapon options are, I'm going to include a weapon ranking on screen now, showing you a rough idea of what to expect. With that in mind, do understand that a weapon ranking should not be taken as the objective truth, just use it to get a general idea because there are a lot of assumptions, and this will vary heavily based on your team, rotation, artifact sets, stats, and much more. Generally speaking though, you can see that her signature weapon is her best, but other 5-star swords, like notably Haran and a few others, are very strong and very comparable, and just as a whole, a lot of different 5-star swords are very good for her. Additionally, her 4-star free-to-play option is not even that far behind as far as free-to-play options go, making her pretty accessible weapon-wise. You have other good options like Black Sword and other 4-stars, so there should be a good option for you, regardless of what type of player you are. For Clorinde's more advanced tips and combos, here's what you need to know. First of all, she's a very straightforward character, at least once you understand how she works. When you are playing her, you typically just want to make sure you are using your support character's abilities first, buffing your Clorinde, maybe summoning Oz, swirling Electro, applying Dendro to enemies, doing what you need to do on other characters, then swapping into your Clorinde. What Clorinde will do is typically start her rotation out with her elemental burst, doing some damage and giving her bond of life. Afterwards, you can use your skill and then do a free sword hit because of the bond of life you gained from your burst, therefore pressing E and then E again, and then you will do your standard combo, which is 3 normal attacks into a skill. This combo you do inside of your skill to effectively fire off 3 pistol hits and then 1 sword hit, giving you bond of life for the first 3 pistol shots, and then consuming that to do your strongest possible sword hit with your skill press after 3 normals. This makes your combo 3 normals into a skill, otherwise known as N3E, which you can typically do 5 of on top of your burst and the additional sword hit you get afterwards. It is worth noting that in your standard rotation, you do have some downtime, obviously on Clorinde's skill, as I mentioned earlier, and what you will do during this time is set up on your support characters, swap through them while your skill's on cooldown, go back to her, and then also use your burst, which will take around a second or two. That will also contribute to your skill coming back off cooldown, with the alternative being, as mentioned many times already, using the Thundering Fury set, which reduces its cooldown significantly. If you're using the Thundering Fury set, your rotation is similar but longer. Instead of it being a 16 or so second rotation, it will be a lot longer, around 25 to 26 seconds, giving you better synergy and better uptime on your support character's abilities, like notably having better Oz uptime if you're running Fischl. Your rotation will look pretty similar, it will just be longer and will allow you to use 2 of Clorinde's skills in a rotation. Because your cooldown will constantly decrease as you're triggering reactions, your Clorinde skill will be ready very fast after the first one, provided you're playing a standard Clorinde team and are triggering reactions. Because of this, your setup will be the same, but you will have 2 DPS windows on Clorinde, and between each one, you will swap to your support characters to refresh their abilities, resummon Oz, reapply Dendro, re-swirl Electro, or whatever you need, and then go back to your Clorinde. One of your 2 windows will start off with your burst, and then you will repeat the same rotation of EE and then 3 normals into an E, and then your other DPS window will be the exact same thing but without your burst and the extra sword hit you're getting. I do want to mention, just to be as complete as possible, that I have found that it's possible to get 6 and 3 Es if you aren't using your burst or don't have it ready and are really tight with the timing, but it's not easy to do so, and typically you are using your burst anyways, so for the most part, just keep in mind that all you need to know with Clorinde's combos is you are using your burst, then using your skill twice to get a sword hit off, and then doing as many 3 normals into a skill combo and 3 Es as you can in order to maximize your overall damage. Your standard rotation is pretty short without the Thundering Fury set, and with the Thundering Fury set, it's a bit longer as you are using your skill twice inside of a longer rotation, swapping out to refresh your support character's abilities. I do also want to mention before moving on that you can animation cancel your 3rd gunshot into your skill press by doing 1, 2, 3 and then skill. I can actually do it faster. 1, 2, 3 and then skill as the gunshot is coming out in order to just not have to waste any time. Oh, and I also wanted to mention that you can actually use your sword hit where you lunge forward to dodge certain attacks against certain enemies, which can be useful if you're aiming it correctly against certain enemies. Moving on, for Clorinde's constellations, here there are a few interesting ones. First of all, Clorinde C1 is a pretty solid first constellation that just gives her more damage. There will be coordinated hits of electro damage as she's doing normal attacks inside of her skill, which will have a decent bonus scaling, will come out fast, and will apply more electro. On a similar note, her C2 also provides you with damage increase as well, as will effectively double your A4 passive's scaling increase, giving you 30% more attack scaling per electro reaction, stacking up to 3 times for a total of 90%, on top of also giving you some interruption resistance, which is very nice for comfort, especially because Clorinde is kind of locked into her skill dashing around, and you obviously don't want to get knocked everywhere. I do want to say that in case you're wondering, both C1 and C2 can provide you with roughly a 20 to 25% personal damage increase, so they are both pretty strong, but keep in mind that while you do increase your personal Clorinde's damage, a lot of her damage does come from her teams. You're running strong off-field supports like Fischl, Beidou, or Yai, a Dendro character like Nahida, someone like Kazuha, characters that have good damage as well, and you also get a lot of damage from reactions, so even though her personal damage does get increased a lot, and these constellations are definitely pretty good, especially the interruption resistance and bonus damage, note that because Clorinde isn't exactly a hyper carry and does have a lot of team damage as well, they aren't as big overall team damage increases as you may think, so don't feel forced or baited to get any, but each constellation will increase your personal damage by quite a bit, making either C1 or C2 solid early stopping points if you want them. Moving on, Clorinde C3 and C5 increase her talent levels, with C3 being decent because her skill talent is important. C4 increases her burst damage significantly based on her bond of life percentage, up to 200% more, honestly being quite a big chunk of burst damage that you're gaining from this, so genuinely not a bad C4. And lastly, her 6th constellation gives you just a ton of stats. It's another SA that gives her both crit rate and crit damage inside of her skill, on top of getting another bonus source of electro damage, once again inside of her skill. Clorinde does appear here to also get damage reduction and more interruption resistance. But for the most part, this is just more hits of electro damage, more crit rate, more crit damage, just more damage overall. Overall, Clorinde does have good constellations and even good early stopping points like C1 or C2, but keep in mind that they're really not needed because not only is she a solid character at C0, but a lot of her damage does come from her team and reactions as well, so good constellations, but not essential. Alright, now moving on, let's get into one of the most important sections regarding Clorinde's best teams and synergies. Before I give you guys team archetypes and example teams you can use, here's some general information about her supports that you should know. First of all, oftentimes her best supports are characters with relatively low cooldowns that can fit her rotation. Now, I'm not going to go over the rotations again because I covered that in one of the last sections, but characters with short cooldowns such as Fischl, Nahida, or Kazuha can all work well at doing a shorter 15 or 16 second rotation if you aren't running the Thundering Fury set, and even if you are, they are still very efficient as you can refresh their abilities, for example, resummon Oz, in between both of your Clorinde skills. Outside of that, you also need to keep in mind that Clorinde is typically ran with another Electro character, usually an Electro off-field support who provides you with a lot of utility. In fact, having another Electro unit such as Fischl or others that I'll mention not only will give you a large amount of energy, right, constantly generating Electro particles for you, will also give you the Electro resonance, but also very importantly, they will do a huge chunk of your team's damage as well. While Clorinde is a great carry, a big chunk of your team's damage also comes from a second Electro character if they are built properly. This is because typically her best teams are going to be buffing your Electro damage as a whole. For example, applying Dendro so that you can aggravate, or swirling Electro so you greatly decrease the enemy's Electro res and give your team either damage bonus with Kazuha or EM with Sucrose, allowing not just your Clorinde to do more damage, but also your second Electro character to carry you as well. On top of that, you guys already know that Fischl's really broken, so I usually recommend her as the premier choice. The best battery, really good single target damage, good Electro application, synergizes well with Clorinde's teams, and Clorinde herself, allows you to run less ER, and also gets better with constellations, while still being good at a baseline. With that in mind, other Electro characters such as Yai, Miko, Beto, or even Kuki, but more so in Quick Bloom teams than Aggravate, can all be good options as well. Additionally, something I mentioned earlier in the video is that Clorinde is not really someone who needs a healer. This is because, as you saw, she will heal with every sword hit inside of her skill, every lunge, every time you repress your E, and so while having a healer or a shielder can be comfy, it's still viable, it's really not as needed, and this allows you to be able to run a team full of offensive and strong, either damage dealing or damage buffing supports, which is really important for your team's overall DPS. Most other aggravate carries using, let's say, Keqing, for example, is a good character, but they will need to run a defensive option. A Keqing team will oftentimes either replace Nahida for Kirara, Baiju, or Yao Yao, or replace someone like Kazuha for Jean or Shan Yun. While this is fine, it obviously will make you lose out on a lot of damage, grouping, or buffs, a lot of things that these other really strong offensive supports provide your team with. Because of this, and again, there's a lot of different characters you can use, you don't need the 5 stars, I'll get into that shortly, you effectively have access to a much stronger set of supports, a stronger team overall, because Clorinde doesn't need a healer and can self-sustain. Again, running a shield or a healer, if you just need it for comfort, is still perfectly fine, but know that you have the option, and it's typically recommended to go for more offensive supports / sub DPSs who can really do a ton for your overall team's damage. Now, to actually talk about teams and give you some examples, first of all, as I said, Aggravate is one of her standard teams. For Aggravate, you just want to pair Clorinde with an Electro support, a Dendro one, and an Anemo one. As we saw, there are many options for your Electro support. Fischl is the standard one, but many others work as well. For your Dendro option, Nahida is the best, but you can use virtually any off-field Dendro support, such as the main character, Kole, or even someone that provides you with defensive utility like Kirara, Baiju, or Yao Yao. For your Anemo support, Kazuha gives you grouping and insane buffs, and on a similar note, Sucrose gives you a lot of elemental mastery and grouping as well, and this can make for a solid Hyperbloom team. You can still run an Anemo healer like Jean, Shenyun, or Sayu, but you will obviously get less damage. Keep in mind also that in an Aggravate team, your last slot is technically flexible, and you can even do something like run Zhongli instead of an Anemo unit if you really need a shielder. Another shield option, as I mentioned, is Kirara. You can kind of flex these slots a lot. I've included 3 example teams here, this one being my favorite, but I've also cleared with Yai Miko being particularly nice to fill in any downtimes you may have if you aren't running the Thundering Fury set and have a bit more time to spend on your other characters. Additionally, you can also put a slow Hydro Applier in this team, someone like Farina or Yelan, and you can turn it from an Aggravate team to a Quick Bloom team. This will be a team where you're proccing Quicken, and therefore Aggravate, and also getting some bonus Hyper Blooms on your Electro characters. This will give you a little bit of extra damage, and especially allows you to run someone like Farina, who gives you huge amounts of damage buffs and is just a very solid character overall. She has good personal damage, good team buffs, and you can even run someone like a healer in this team, for example Kuki, who could help you heal a bit more for your Farina or help you with Hyper Blooming. With that in mind, it's okay if you're Hyper Blooming on Clorinde, even if she's not on full EM, it's some bonus bonus damage, you can just go for an EM Sands in this team, and this team overall performs very well. Keep in mind, you can also run a prototype Amber on Nahida if you want a bit more healing, as Furina won't really be fully stacked in this team, especially without a healer. You still don't need a healer because Clorinde's HP, as you know, you can heal it back up, so you still get a decent amount of stacks, but if you want more, you can always run prototype Amber Nahida, which is great, or run a healer in your team as a viable option. In these quick bloom teams, you can also run someone like Yelan or even a faster Hydro Plier like Xingqiu, but then especially with Xingqiu, you will lose out on some aggravates and turn into a bit more of a hyper bloom team, which is a bit less recommended but still viable. For some other options, here's where Clorinde is a bit more limited. I think she's really strong in Dendro teams, genuinely great aggravate carry, great quick bloom carry, but in her other teams, she's viable and can be strong, but I do not think they are as powerful. First of all, you can play Clorinde in a Chevreuse overload team where you can pair her with another Electro character and another Pyro. Someone like Toma with his C1 can work well. You can also use Xiangling or whatever fits your rotation, and it can be a perfectly fine team. Even though Chevreuse can't heal you because of your Bond of Life mechanic, she will give you a ton of damage through her passives and Constellations, so she definitely does make this team viable as an alternative if you don't want to play Dendro. Additionally, you can play Clorinde in a Taser team with an Electro unit, a Hydro unit, and a flexible last slot. Hyper carry teams are also technically viable, but they haven't felt that great in my testing, at least when compared to the other teams. For the most part, I think she does have quite a few viable teams that you can play around with, but clearly is a character that, in my opinion, shines the most in aggravate and quick bloom teams. Alright, now with that out of the way, let's get into a Clorinde showcase in the current Spiral Abyss, showing you what she can do in a pretty standard team. My Clorinde is pretty well built. She's on a Mistsplitter, not her signature, but still a 5-star, on the Thundering Fury set because I've been farming it forever, and I think it's insane on her. Constellation 0, of course, and talent level 9. For her ratio, it is quite good, 76 to 29, but I also get 20 crit rate from her passive, so I'm basically capped on that. Really good stats, good investment because I've been farming the set for so long, and obviously C0 Clorinde in some pretty strong teams. I hope you enjoyed the guide, and I hope you'll enjoy the showcase. Let's go.
Time to testify. Into the shadows. Ready. Ready.
Midnight Fantastic. Mindless side effect.
Time to testify. Loaded. Into the shadows.
Midnight Fantastic.
Wind strike. Hunt them down.
As you wish, me.
Fallen leaves. Adorn mine. Eagle wings. Shoot on sight. Ready.
And so yeah, overall, I really like Clorinde. I think she's a solid character. Now, granted, I am biased to liking a lot of Electro and aggravate teams in general, but I think Clorinde's a solid DPS. She's not game breaking. I don't think you need her, but if you like her playstyle, it's very unique. You have like a weird like gun and sword combo, which is unlike anything else and unlike any other character. I enjoy her playstyle. She's definitely strong enough, not game breaking, but if you like her, you could definitely get her and be content with her, provided you enjoy her playstyle and her teams. Thanks so much for watching. If there's anything you want to add, it will be in a pinned comment as always. And with that being said, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.